August 5th, 2014. Camp Whisper Pines shimmered under the golden light of a perfect summer sunset. The lake reflected the surrounding forest in mirror-like stillness, broken only by the occasional splash of a fish or the gentle wake of a canoe returning to shore. For the 78 children attending the 2-week wilderness program, it was the quintessential summer camp experience, one they would remember their entire lives, though not for the reasons anyone could have anticipated. In the central dining hall, 5 senior counselors gathered after lights out for their nightly meeting. The campers had been settled into their cabins, with junior counselors keeping watch while the leadership team reviewed the day and planned activities for tomorrow. "Weather report says clear skies for the overnight hike," said Michael Chen, 24, checking his phone, his head counselor. He oversaw all camp activities with a meticulous attention to detail that had earned him the nickname the Captain. Beside him, Emma Reyes nodded. She was responsible for waterfront activities and wilderness first aid. "Trail conditions are good. I checked the ridge path this morning. The kids are excited," added Aiden Walsh, 22, the athletics director, whose boundless energy made him a favorite among the younger campers. "Some of the first-timers are nervous about sleeping outdoors, but the older kids are talking them through it." Lily Nichols, 23, in charge of arts and nature education, spread a map across the table. "I've marked the best spots for stargazing. The meteor showers should be visible from Hawkins Ridge around midnight." "Perfect," said the 5th counselor, Devin Jackson, 24, who handled logistics and equipment. "I've got the telescope packed and extra batteries for the emergency radios." They were a close-knit team. All college students or recent graduates who had worked at Whisper Pines for at least 3 summers. Camp director Margaret Holden had selected them personally, confident in their ability to handle the responsibilities of caring for children in the remote woodland setting. As their meeting concluded around 10:30 p.m., Michael reminded everyone of the schedule. "We meet at the trailhead at 7 a.m. with the senior campers." The truth behind the 5 missing counselors of Camp Whisper Pines is about to take a turn no one could have predicted. What started as a disappearance is unraveling into one of the darkest conspiracies we've ever uncovered. Before we go deeper, hit subscribe and turn on notifications. We spend months digging into cases others ignore, accessing documents, and hearing from witnesses long forgotten. If you're drawn to mysteries the media left behind, subscribing to Gone Cold means you'll never miss a single revelation. Now, let's go back to 2025 when a routine drone flight revealed what really happened in those woods. Junior counselors will handle breakfast for the younger groups. The 5 separated, heading to their respective cabins at the edge of the staff area. A security camera mounted on the dining hall captured their departures, Michael and Devin walking north, Emma and Lily heading east, and Aiden jogging west toward the sports field. It's likely for a final equipment check. It was the last time any of them would be seen. Asterisk, the first hint that something was wrong came 6:45 a.m. when none of the senior counselors arrived for the breakfast preparation. Margaret Holden, who lived in a cabin at the entrance to the camp, was alerted by a junior counselor who had knocked on each of their cabin doors and found them empty. "Their beds haven't been slept in," reported Tyler Williams, an 18-year-old in his first year as a counselor, and Michael always does the coffee first thing. Initially, assuming they had started early preparations for the hike, Margaret checked the equipment shed, the trailhead, and the dining hall. When her calls to their cell phones went unanswered, a more thorough search began. By 8:30 a.m., with the campers growing restless and confused by the change in routine, Margaret made the difficult decision to contact the sheriff's department. The overnight hike was canceled, and the junior counselors were instructed to keep the children occupied with indoor activities. Sheriff Robert Diaz arrived within the hour, along with 4 deputies. The remote location of Camp Whisper Pines, 30 miles from the nearest town in the densely forested mountains of northern Vermont, complicated the response. "When was the last confirmed sighting?" Sheriff Diaz asked, notebook in hand. "The security camera shows them leaving the dining hall." At 10:38 p.m., Margaret replied, her face taut with worry. "We have cameras at the camp entrance and main buildings, but not on the individual cabins or trails." The footage confirmed that none of the 5 had left through the main entrance. Their vehicles remained parked in the staff lot. Personal belongings, including wallets, IDs, and in some cases, cell phones, were still in their cabins. By afternoon, the search had expanded to include state police and forest rangers. Parents were notified of an administrative issue that had altered the camp's schedule, a careful euphemism to prevent panic while the search continued. Search dogs followed trails that led in 5 different directions before losing the scents at various points in the surrounding forest. Helicopter sweeps revealed nothing in the dense woodland. As darkness fell again, there was no sign of the missing counselors. Asterisk, the disappearance of 5 young adults from camp. Whisper Pines became national news within days. Parents hurriedly collected their children as the camp shut down for the investigation. Remote location, previously valued for its pristine isolation, now seemed ominous. Theories multiplied as the search expanded. Some believed the counselors had encountered a bear or other predator. Others suggested they had planned their disappearance as some kind of prank or social experiment. The more sensationalist corners of the internet proposed supernatural explanations, seizing on local legends about the mountains. For the families of the missing, these speculations were agony. They gathered at a hotel in the nearest town, united by grief and uncertainty as the search entered its 2nd week with no substantial leads. "My son wouldn't leave those children," insisted Michael Chen's father during a press conference. Something happened to them, something they couldn't control. The investigation revealed no personal conflicts among the 5, no romantic entanglements gone wrong, no financial troubles or legal issues that might explain a voluntary disappearance. Their social media accounts showed nothing unusual. Just typical posts about summer activities and excitement about the camp season. The most puzzling aspect was the lack of physical evidence. Despite one of the most extensive search operations in the state's history, no clothing, equipment, or personal items were found. No blood or signs of struggle. No footprints beyond the areas where the dogs had lost their scents. It's as if they vanished into thin air, a frustrated Sheriff Diaz told reporters off the record. As weeks turned into months, the active search was scaled back. The case remained open, with a dedicated task force continuing to follow leads, but the daily presence of search teams in the forest ended. Camp Whisper Pines did not reopen the following summer. The once beloved institution became a macabre landmark, the focus of true crime podcasts and amateur sleuths who would occasionally venture onto the property. Despite the no trespassing signs, for 11 years, the disappearance of the 5 counselors remained one of the region's most enduring mysteries, a story told around campfires. A cautionary tale about the dangers lurking in even the most idyllic wilderness settings, until a drone pilot, mapping the forest for an environmental study, captured something that would break the case wide open. Dr. Eliza Montgomery adjusted the controls of her drone as it soared above the canopy of the dense Vermont forest. At 32, she was one of the leading environmental scientists at the Northeast Ecological Research Center, specializing in forest degradation and recovery patterns. Today's mission was routine capturing aerial imagery of the old Whisper Pines property and surrounding woodland for a climate change impact study. The once vibrant summer camp had been abandoned after the disappearances, eventually purchased by a conservation trust that maintained it as an ecological research site. Most of the buildings still stood, though weathered by 11 New England winters without maintenance. Nature was slowly reclaiming the human intrusion, with vines crawling up cabin walls and saplings pushing through the cracked basketball court. Altitude. Holding at 200 feet, Eliza noted into her digital recorder as she monitored the drone's path on her tablet. Beginning grid pattern over Sector 7, her research assistant, Ben Torres, marked their position on a topographical map. At 25, he was a doctoral student who had grown up in the region and remembered the impact of the counselor's disappearance on the local community. "We're about 3 miles northeast of the main camp now," he said. "This area wasn't part of the original search grid because it's beyond the camp's property line." Elisa nodded, focused on the drone's camera feed. The device was capturing high-resolution images of the forest density. When something unusual appeared at the edge of the frame, a geometric anomaly amid the organic shapes of the wilderness. She adjusted the drone's path, directing it toward the unexpected feature. The camera revealed what appeared to be a structure, partially obscured by the forest canopy. Unlike the weathered wood of the camp buildings, this structure seemed to be made of metal or concrete, with straight lines and right angles that couldn't have occurred naturally. "There shouldn't be any buildings in this area," Ben said, checking the map again. "It's protected state forest for miles." Elisa guided the drone lower, maneuvering carefully to avoid branches as she tried to get a clearer view. Focused, he could see what appeared to be a small compound, a central building with metal walls and a few smaller outbuildings, all partially camouflaged by natural materials and deliberately placed vegetation. "This is definitely man-made," Eliza said, zooming in further, "and relatively recent." As the drone hovered lower, the camera captured something that made both researchers freeze. A symbol painted on the roof of the main building, faded but still visible. A triangle inside a circle, with 5 stars arranged around the inner edge of the circle. "Ben, are you seeing this?" Lisa asked, her voice tense. Ben was already pulling up a browser on his phone. After a few quick searches, he turned the screen toward Eliza. "There." In a news article about the Whisper Pines disappearance was a photo of the 5 missing counselors standing together the summer before they vanished. All 5 wore matching staff shirts, with the camp's logo emblazoned on the front, a triangle inside a circle with 5 small pine trees around the edge. "That's not the camp logo," Eliza said, looking between the phone and the drone footage. But it's similar." "Modified, we need to call the police," Ben said, "now." Eliza nodded, capturing several more images from different angles before bringing the drone back to a safe height. As she did, the camera caught one more detail or trail, leading from the mysterious compound toward a rock formation about half a mile away. At the base of the rocks, barely visible, was what appeared to be an entrance of some kind. Within hours, the quiet research expedition had transformed into a major police operation. Eliza and Ben found themselves in the back of a state police SUV, showing their footage to Detective Laura Reeves, who had taken over the cold case investigation 3 years earlier. "You're certain this area wasn't covered in the original search?" Reeves asked, studying the images intently. "Positive," Ben replied. "It's 3 miles outside the search perimeter they established. Based on satellite imagery from 2014, this structure didn't exist when they disappeared." Detective Reeves nodded grimly, "which means someone built it afterward. Possibly because they knew exactly where to look, or where not to look." Asterisk by sunset, a joint task force of state police, FBI agents, and forest rangers had established a command center at the old camp entrance. The discovery had breathed new life into the cold case, with investigators who had worked the original disappearance returning to join the operation, including retired Sheriff Robert Diaz. "We could never figure out how 5 adults could vanish without leaving any trace," Diaz told Detective Reeves as they reviewed the original case files. "No footprints beyond certain points, no disturbed vegetation, no scent trails the dogs could follow. It was as if they'd been lifted away or taken through pre-established routes designed to hide evidence," Reeves suggested. "Routes that led to wherever this compound is. The tactical approach would be delicate. The remote location and unknown nature of the compound required careful planning." Aerial surveillance continued with more sophisticated equipment, including thermal imaging that detected minimal heat signatures from the structure, suggesting it was either unoccupied or heavily insulated. By morning, the ground team was ready to move in. Eliza and Ben remained at the command center, having provided all the coordinates and footage they had captured. The operation was now in the hands of professionals. Though both researchers felt personally invested in the outcome, Detective Reeves joined the lead tactical team, approaching the compound from multiple angles through the dense forest. Despite their careful movements, the element of surprise was lost when a perimeter alarm triggered, a nearly invisible tripwire connected to a silent alert system. By the time the teams reached the compound, it was clear someone had fled in haste. The main building door stood open, and inside, evidence of recent occupation was abundant: food still warm in the microwave, computer screens still glowing, chairs pushed back as if vacated in a hurry. "Secure the area," shouted the tactical team leader. "Check for hidden rooms or passages." Interior revealed a sophisticated operation. One room contained surveillance equipment monitoring the approaches to the compound. Another held communications, gear that appeared capable of long-range, encrypted transmissions. But most disturbing was what they found in the central room 5 walls, each dedicated to one of the missing counselors' photos. Medical records, psychological profiles daily, schedules, and detailed personal histories covered the walls. Years of surveillance, documenting lives that had supposedly ended in 2014. The most recent photos were dated just months earlier. "They're alive," Reeves whispered, staring at an image of Emma Reyes, now appearing to be in her mid-30s, shopping at a grocery store in what looked like a small town. But why had they been targeted? What was the purpose of this elaborate monitoring operation? Where were they now? The answers began to emerge as investigators discovered a hidden room accessed through a bookshelf mechanism. Inside was an archive dozens of binders filled with reports, photographs, and what appeared to be experimental data. The earliest materials dated back to 2010, 4 years before the disappearance. They were being watched before they vanished, Reeves realized, flipping through a binder labeled Pre-Selection Surveillance. This was planned years in advance. The most chilling discovery came when they found a map detailing the location of 5 separate integration sites across the country's small towns where the counselors had apparently been relocated under new identities. Each site was marked with a different colored pin and code name: Captain Michael, Healer Emma, Athlete Aiden, Naturalist Lily, and Engineer Devin. A document labeled Project Renewal outlined the program's objective in clinical language: long-term isolation and reintegration study to determine adaptability of subjects to complete identity reconstruction. Subjects selected for optimal psychological profiles, indicating high adaptability, leadership qualities, and specialized skill sets. As Detective Reeves tried to process the implications, a call came in from the second team that had followed the trail to the rock formation. They discovered an entrance to an underground facility, significantly larger and more sophisticated than the monitoring compound. "You need to see this?" The team leader's voice crackled over the radio. "It looks like some kind of research installation. And there are records here, extensive records. They weren't just watching those 5 counselors. There are files on dozens of other people who went missing across the country over the past 15 years. The underground facility revealed the true scope of what they were dealing with. Built into the natural cave system beneath the mountain, it spanned thousands of square feet of laboratories, living quarters, and what appeared to be training facilities. Most disturbing were the 5 isolation chambers rooms designed for long-term habitation, but completely cut off from the outside world. They kept them here, Dr. Vanessa Liu, the FBI's forensic psychologist, concluded after examining the rooms. Based on the setup and the documentation we found, each counselor was held in isolation for approximately 18 months before being relocated with their new identities. The evidence pointed to an elaborate psychological experiment, testing how effectively human beings could be separated from their established identities and integrated into completely new lives. The subjects hadn't been chosen randomly. The counselors had been selected for specific psychological traits, monitored for years before their abduction, and then systematically stripped of their original identities through isolation and intensive psychological conditioning. "This is McCulture-level experimentation," Agent Thomas Wilson, the FBI lead, said during the briefing at the command center. "But privately funded and far more sophisticated than anything we've seen before." The documentation revealed the involvement of a research organization called the Prometheus Institute, a privately funded think tank ostensibly dedicated to human potential and adaptation studies. Their legitimate research had served as cover for the clandestine program targeting individuals for what they termed deep identity reconstruction. The 5 counselors were part of what they called Cohort 7, Detective Reeves explained, displaying the documents on a screen. There have been at least 12 cohorts, with subjects taken from different environments across the country. Most recent materials indicated that the counselors had been living under new identities in 5 different states, completely unaware of their previous lives. The psychological conditioning had been so thorough that, according to the reports, They had fully integrated into their new identities with no conscious memory of who they had been. "How is that even possible?" asked Sheriff Diaz, who had remained for the investigation despite his retirement. Dr. Liu explained, "A combination of isolation, drug therapy, hypnosis, and something they called narrative replacement therapy. They systematically erased their existing life narratives and implanted new ones, complete with artificial memories. The subjects were chosen partly because they exhibited high suggestibility in psychological assessments, though they wouldn't have been aware they were being tested. By the third day of the investigation, the focus shifted to locating the 5 counselors now living as different people in different parts of the country. The operation required extreme delicacy. These weren't just missing persons to be recovered. They were individuals who believed themselves to be someone else entirely. Can't just rush in and tell them their entire lives are fabrications," Agent Wilson cautioned. The psychological trauma could be devastating. The first breakthrough came when they located Michael Chun now, living as Professor Mark Carson in a small college town in Oregon. He had been given a completely new background as a computer science professor, apparently utilizing his natural aptitude in a field adjacent to his original studies. Surveillance photos showed a man who resembled Michael, but with subtle differences, his hair styled differently, glasses he hadn't worn before, and a more reserved demeanor than the charismatic camp counselor he had once been. According to these records, he was their most successful subject, Detective Reeves said, reviewing his file. He fully integrated into his new identity within 2 years, with no signs of memory breakthrough or identity confusion. Question now was how to approach him and the others without triggering psychological trauma or alerting whoever had been running the program. The abrupt abandonment of the monitoring compound suggested that those responsible knew they had been discovered and might take drastic measures to protect their investment. Emma Reyes had been relocated to Minnesota, where she worked as a nurse, a profession that paralleled her previous interest in first aid. Aiden Walsh was in Colorado, working as a physical trainer. Lily Nichols had been placed in Washington State as an environmental consultant, and Devin Jackson was in Texas, employed by an engineering firm. 5 lives completely reconstructed. 5 families who had spent 11 years grieving for loved ones who were alive but reachable, separated not by death, but by artificially constructed identities, as the task force prepared extraction plans for each location. Dr. Liu raised a profound ethical question. What if they're happy? What if their new lives are fulfilling? Do we have the right to shatter the identities they now believe are real? Detective Reeves had no easy answer. But as she studied the photographs of the 5 counselors, both as they had been and as they now appeared, she knew they deserved to know the truth, however painful it might be. Their families deserved closure, and those responsible for stealing 11 years of their real lives deserved justice. The operation to recover the 5 counselors was scheduled to begin at dawn the next day, with synchronized approaches at all 5 locations. But as the teams made their final preparations, disturbing discovery in the communications logs at the underground facility suggested the situation was even more complex than they had realized. The 5 subjects of Cohort 7 were not just being monitored. According to the most recent entries, they were being prepared for Phase 3, scheduled to begin the following month. What exactly Phase 3 entailed wasn't specified, but the preparation notes included references to reunion protocols and collective memory integration. After 11 years apart, living completely different lives with no knowledge of their true identities, the 5 counselors were about to be brought back together. The question was, for what purpose? Asterisk at dawn, FBI teams approached all 5 former counselors simultaneously across the country. Each encounter followed careful protocols designed to minimize psychological trauma. In Portland, Professor Mark Carson, formerly Michael Chun, was preparing for his morning lecture when agents arrived. Dr. Rita Sharma, a trauma psychologist, led the conversation. "Professor Carson, we have reason to believe your memories and identity were artificially constructed," she explained gently. 11 years ago, you were involved in an incident that resulted in your original identity being replaced. Mark's response progressed exactly as predicted: disbelief, followed by dismissive laughter. then growing concern as they showed him photographs of Michael Chen, documents from his real past, and video footage from Camp Whisper Pines. "This is ridiculous," he insisted, though his hand trembled as he touched a photograph. "I grew up in Seattle. I've never been to Vermont." The breakthrough came when they showed him his parents now 11 years older than when he had last seen them. Something flickered in his eyes. Recognition fighting against psychological conditioning. Across the country, similar scenes unfolded with varying results. Emma Reyes, now Elizabeth Reed, became physically ill when confronted with her past. Aidan Walsh, living as Aaron Westby, came aggressive before breaking down as repressed memories surfaced. Lily Nichols, now Laura Nelson, collapsed as buried memories flooded back in fragments. Devin Jackson, reinvented as Daniel Jensen, responded with methodical calm, admitting to dreams of a lake and forest he couldn't place. By nightfall, all 5 had been transported to a specialized medical facility in Maryland. Detective Reeves watched through one-way glass as they were brought together for the first time in 11 years. None fully recognized the others, yet there was tension in the room, bodies remembering what minds had been forced to forget. "What they've endured is unprecedented," Dr. Liu said quietly. "They've lived entire lives that never existed." Investigation into the Prometheus Institute accelerated. The underground facility had yielded records pointing to a network of similar operations. Other cohorts remained unaccounted for, potentially dozens of people living false lives according to recovered documents. Phase 3 would have reunited the 5 counselors to test whether proximity would trigger spontaneous memory recovery, and whether their original group dynamics would reassert themselves despite their new identities. They weren't just studying identity reconstruction, Agent Wilson explained. They were studying whether fundamental human connections transcend artificial memory barriers. Federal agents raided Prometheus Institute offices in 3 cities. Several high-ranking members were arrested, though the director remained at large. 3 months later, Detective Reeves returned to the medical facility where the 5 continued their recovery. The process of reclaiming their original identities while integrating experiences from their artificial lives had no medical precedent. In a sunlit common room, the 5 sat together, engaged in a board game. Michael noticed her first, raising a hand in greeting. "Detective Reeves, just in time for game night. I'm finally beating Aidan at something." Their easy use of original names, a milestone that had taken months, struck Reeves immediately. "How are you all doing?" she asked, joining them. "Better days than bad now," Emma replied, her speech occasionally shifting between her original manner and Elizabeth Reed's more reserved cadence. "The nightmares are less frequent." Lily, who had struggled most with psychological fracturing, added, "I can distinguish between real memories and implanted ones most of the time now." Devin, still analytical, explained, "The cognitive mapping exercises have been effective. I've traced most of the false memory constructs to their sources." Aidan demonstrated less patience. "I just want the trial to start. I don't want to see their faces when they're confronted with what they did to us." "There's been a development," Reeves told them. "We've identified 3 more cohorts, 15 people who, like you, were given new identities. Recovery operations begin next week." The 5 exchanged glances, their silent communication reflecting strengthened bonds. Despite 11 years apart, their original connections had reasserted themselves, proving exactly what their captors had hoped to study. "We want to help," Michael said, speaking for the group. "No one understands what they're about to go through better than we do." After the meeting, Reeves walked with Dr. Liu through the facility gardens. "What happens to them now?" Reeves asked. "They can't just go back to their old lives." "No," Liu agreed. "And parts of their engineered lives have become genuine." Michael really is an excellent professor. Emma's nursing skills are real, even if the training memories were implanted. They'll build new lives integrating both aspects of who they are. Family. Reunions had occurred with mixed results. Some relationships could be rebuilt, others had been damaged by years of separation and psychological manipulation. The most remarkable outcome, Liu continued, is how they've reconstituted themselves as a unit. The researchers were right about one thing: human connections were stronger than the conditioning. As fall settled over the countryside, the 5 former counselors stood together at a window, watching leaves drift from trees. They were neither who they had been before their abduction, nor the artificial constructs created in the underground facility. They were something new survivors who had reclaimed their core identities. While carrying the weight of lives they had never chosen, the drone that had spotted the hidden compound had exposed a shadow operation that had manipulated human lives like laboratory specimens, revealed the resilience of the human mind, and reunited 5 people whose bonds had proven stronger than the elaborate psychological barriers erected to separate them. For Detective Reeves, watching them quietly, the case represented both the darkest and most hopeful aspects of human nature. The investigation would continue. Other victims would be found, and those responsible would face justice. But the 5 people before her had already achieved the most important victory. They had found their way back to themselves and to each other. The Whisper Pines camp case raises a disturbing question. How many missing people live among us without knowing who they really are? If this case is stuck with you, click like. This will help more people find these investigations and perhaps even the truth. What do you think of the Prometheus Institute? Could similar experiments still be happening? And what would you do if you weren't yourself? Share your thoughts in the comments. I read them all. If you haven't signed up yet, sign up.